Hi, welcome to Pure Love, episode 5. I am Ignacio Rivera.
And I'm Mandy.
And this episode is about Ascending by, who is it ascending by?
Vamos Paris.
Yes. And the question is pertaining to me being a teen parent. Obviously not now, but when I was a teen parent, and what kind of conversations I had with my daughter when she hit being a teenager. So tell us what Pure Love is about.
Well, Pure Love is about open and honest conversation between children and their parents about sex, sexuality, their bodies, consent, everything that goes along with it. Yeah.
Life, really. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We were talking about this a little bit prior, and this is probably going to be like the
first time conversation,
right? Yeah. So, okay. So, because I cannot remember ever saying to you like, "Don't be like me. Don't be a teen mom."
And the funny thing about that is, even if it were to happen, I would never look at it in a bad way either, because I feel like you are such a good example of how you can turn a possibly bad situation into a great one. So it was never scary for me to either be a single parent or a young parent, because I'm like, I knew that no matter what, I could use the tools you gave me and that I would have your support. So it was
Absolutely.
it never was scary for me like it is for other people.
Oh, thank you, baby.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't remember doing that because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be like, we talk about fear a lot, right? Like this teaching through fear. And I didn't want to do that because I got pregnant with you when I was young, but it was not the ideal situation, right? Because you want to be stable, have a job, you want to have support. I didn't have all of those things, but I knew that I wanted to be a good parent. Like I wanted to know what that was. I wanted to explore the possibilities of what a different kind of parent could be. And this is not to say anything negative about my mom, because I love my mother very much. And my mother parented me the way that she knew how to parent me. But as times change,
you have to change your way as a parent.
Yeah, new information, the internet, the interweb, all of these things.
Resources.
You have to start changing with the time and thinking about what does it mean. And I think in every generation of parents have to like ask themselves that question. So I was truly excited. I was excited to be pregnant, and maybe I was naive, but I had plans. I had plans about how I was going to do this and how I was going to talk to you and how I was going to be better and all this stuff. But it was definitely very, very, very difficult. But as I often say, one of the best jobs I ever had in my life. That's the truth. Yeah. But did you feel any pressure, like when you were like a teenager and stuff? Because I know I was trying to talk to you about sex and all that stuff, but I don't know if you felt pressure from me.
I never really felt pressure. I mean, the biggest thing being I wasn't sexually active in my teens, so it's not like I was at risk anyway. But I don't think it was ever. I don't know. It wasn't that scary for me again, because I'm like, it's not like I had this example of like, oh my God, it's gonna be like this, and I'm gonna be miserable, and I'm gonna like it wasn't like a scared straight episode. Like, this is not what you want to do. Like, you see this teen mom, you want to be like that. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just like for me, I saw it as a triumphant story. Like your story, I see it as a triumphant one. So it wasn't really a scary otherworldly thing for me to be like, this is something you want to always avoid. Because, you know, like a lot of people, they put a bad stigma on it being a young mom. But I really don't see it that way. Like, of course, you know, you don't want to grow up while your child is also growing up. But if it happens, you know, you just have to deal with it the best way you can and just try to be better for you and your child. But I felt like if it were to happen, like even now in my life now, I'm like, if it were to happen, you know, you can never really be prepared for a child ever. No matter if you have the money, the support, the time off from work, whatever you
Cats
do.
are having a fight over there.
All the fur babies are here, so. But I feel like no matter what, you can never ever fully be prepared to bring in another life, and so I was just like, whatever happens, I'll just deal with it as it comes because you can't plan for that.
But you bring up an interesting thing, right? Because I remember conversations around, and this intersects like poverty and also like the cycle of what they call the cycle of poverty and the cycle of like teen pregnancy. So one of the things I know that people often talked about around me was this idea that I was going to taint, you know, like just give you this, almost invite you into this world of, you know, being on welfare and thinking it's okay, you know, like, oh, it's okay, you can have babies because you have welfare, and that's the stigma against welfare and the people on welfare. It's a stigma about poverty, and it speaks to this the right. I think this right about our own bodies and how what we decide with our bodies. If we want to have a baby, if we don't want to have a baby.
What I think is interesting about the whole stigma about being a teen mother is throughout history, like up until very recently, and even now in other countries, children are being married off at 12, 11, 13. And throughout history, women have been married off very young and like pushed to have children very young as 14 years old. So it's funny to me that now that women actually are making might not be the conscious decision to become a young mother. Now it's bad, you know, like, because I'm like, throughout history, you force us to have kids young because it's better to get them out of the way, and so you can have more kids. But now it's just like, oh, now you're straining our society's resources. Now you're just getting lazy. Now you're this. And I feel like it's a cultural thing as well, and maybe more against lower income POC more than anybody else. Because I'm like, this is not new. Having young mothers is not anything new for any part of the world. And like, it seems like certain people are the ones that get ostracized for it, other than, you know, rather than other people or other races. I feel like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but the stigma.
I think it's like a combination of things, right? It's like sexism, right?
Definitely,
because even you said like they were married off, right? Like this idea that women were property and like, you know, this is the way things are. So you do this now, and now with the times changing, maybe the conversation is focusing on the idea that I'm being devil's advocate here, like the idea that there's so much more opportunity, right?
Yeah, that you don't have to do
young women, that you don't have to do that you can wait, that you can have a career, you can go to college, you can do these, you know, all of these things. And I think in some senses, yes, you know, like there are people who choose to, and have the resources to go to college. And then sometimes there are those who cannot, or do not, or don't want to go to college, and can make the choices that they need to make in order to decide how they're going to use their body. I think, though, there's a romanticism of having children. I think, you know, I think sometimes, and I know for me it was that way. I'm speaking from experience. I know that there was a romanticism about like having someone that will unconditionally love you and you love it, and
of course
it was just like, I'm gonna have somebody that I'm gonna take care of, and they're gonna love me, and they're gonna be there always and forever. And so of course there is a romanticism of it, and then when it happened, I'm just like, oh, this is real. You know, like, I gotta feed this baby, I gotta do this, and I did it. Like, I took that responsibility very, very seriously, and I did everything I had to do. You know, like, I was hustling, I was doing whatever I needed to do, and I think that and that is the conversation. I think like if you didn't have to hustle, like why put yourself in a position where you had to hustle, right? But I think a lot of times, for some people, for me, I really could not grasp the. I couldn't grasp how expensive it is, to raise a child and all of the little things that went into it. And I did all
So
of those
many little
things.
things.
I did all of those things, but at the time, I was like, at the time, I said I can do this, and I was right. I did do it, uh, but there were many, many barricades and blockades, and I think not a lot of support because of being a young mother. I remember I went to this place still exists actually. It's called The Door. I owe a lot to The Door. They are an adolescent center that is in Manhattan, and I started going there when I was 18. When I found out that I was pregnant, or 17, turning 18 soon, and they provide. I don't know, right? I think it's shifted a little bit throughout the years, but when I was there, they provided a GED program,
They still do.
food,
Therapy,
yes,
arts programs, daycare,
yes, all of that,
recreational things, everything.
everything. And I went there and I got my GED, and I had childcare there while I was in the building, using the resources that were available, um, and being in this and being at the door, really, it was invaluable. Like the support that I got there, the young mothers group that I was a part of, the information that I learned. So I think that we can have a conversation all day long about if young people should have children or not, and then many people would say absolutely not. You should wait till you get older.
I feel like the main, sorry to cut you off, I feel like the main thing about that is assuming that because of my age that I'm not aware or I'm not old enough to decide what I want to do with my body. I think people are putting age as a higher, like at a higher regard than anything else. Because age doesn't really dictate where your mental state is, how mature you are.
It's not a cookie cutter model, right?
Yeah, what you can handle. Because I'm like, just because, like, I know me at 17 was different than someone else at 17.
Right. But let me finish my thought before I forget, because I'm older and I forget things.
Mm-hmm.
So I had those resources in order to learn, like all these wonderful things about breastfeeding, about, things that I just didn't even know about. And that was such a privilege to learn those things and to have support from people, because I have friends who were pregnant, teens, and, went into the hospital to give birth, and they were being absolutely shamed while giving birth, while they're giving birth. Like, who does that to someone, right? So regardless, like I was saying, regardless if you think is a horrific idea or you are neutral on the idea, it happens. We live in a world where teen pregnancy does happen. And so I think a part of talking to young people, again, we continually talk about fear tactics. It's not about the fear tactics. It's about, like, I shared my story. I didn't tell my daughter, do not do this, do not do that.
She gave me information.
She was living it with me, and I was giving her for real information, not, like storytelling.
I think that's the best way to, I guess, combat it, would be to give information. A lot of these girls are getting pregnant young because they don't know about protection or how to say no, or how there's other things you can do without having intercourse, like, or about birth control, anything like that. Like, I'm pretty sure if people had information earlier, then they would make different decisions. Not saying better or worse, but just different.
Well, just more information. So it always goes back to me. This is the Heal Project. This is about pure love. It always goes back to me about these relationships that we have with our parents, our caregivers, our adoptive parents, our aunts, uncles, grandparents, guardians. Like, the conversations and the relationships that we foster with our family of origin, or our adoptive families, like, is so vital, right? Because rather than me telling my daughter, this is the way you should do stuff, I just did it with her, right? I just showed her by example. Like, having a conversation with another person in front of her about the difficulties of juggling school full-time, working full-time, and raising her. and bringing her to school with me when I was doing it, right? So telling her these things is one thing, but actually her experiencing it and seeing how it's affecting my life really, and also allows her to ask me questions, right? Like to ask questions about different things, and then exposing her. I mean, all the time I love the this thing about watching movies and then like or documentaries together and stuff. And watched a lot of stuff around young parents and things, and afterwards we just have like an in-depth like discussion about that person's life or the decisions they made or anything like that. So it's never a this thing. It was like, tell me what you think about that. What would you do if that was your
open discussion?
What would you do? How would you take care of that? If you were in this really tough thing, like who would you ask for help and how? So it was more about building those survival skills, building the skills to critically analyze things. I think that was helpful because I knew that I did not, absolutely did not have the power to tell my daughter, don't get pregnant. I could wish that with all my heart and soul, but at the end of the day, my daughter has to have the skills and the information to make that decision on her own, whether it's conscious or unconsciously. When we really look at it, I don't have complete power over her.
I also think that builds the relationship between parent and child about not being a hypocrite and understanding that
that's a big one.
Things are going to happen and your job is just to love me and support me anyway, and vice versa,
That's right.
It's not about shaming me or making me feel bad or being like, oh, you're so stupid, you did the same thing I did, like didn't you learn from my mistakes? And it's not even about that, and then that may make your child feel worse about themselves. I'm a mistake, I'm something you regret that you wish that you could change,
right?
And they need to understand that that's not, well, if this is really the case, if that's not the case, that they weren't a mistake, that you just want things to be less difficult for them,
right? And then that's the conversation then, right? The conversation is about like a difficult life, what makes it a difficult life, these things. And
because it's like no matter what, having a kid is difficult. Like I work in a preschool and there's parents there who make ridiculous amounts of money, and they still come in with that face like, last night was rough. Like, and they have nannies, they have a 2-parent household, they have their grandparents, they have so much support, and they have us for 9 hours a day, every day. So, but they're still just like, damn, like it does get rough. So regardless of your economic status, your age, you're single, you're married, you have no family, you have a full family, having kids is hard regardless. It's never going to get easy, and it's never something you can truly plan for. It's just, you have to just roll with it.
I think there are additional obstacles when you don't have a job, you're a little younger, because in society it'll be very difficult for you to get a job that can sustain you in this society where things are so expensive. So those are things to think about. But I think I am happy with the way that I had these conversations with her, because I never ever wanted you to think that you were some mistake or anything. That I wanted to just talk to you about sex. Like, are you having sex? Are you doing this? Are you making good decisions? Do you have any questions for me? Can I be there for you? So those were the questions, rather than jumping right to the pregnancy piece, right? Like, don't get pregnant.
There's so many other things to worry about besides that.
Well, I hope that we answered your question.
Thank you for your question.
Yes, and please continue to send in more questions, topics that you would like us to talk about, or if you are interested in interviewing us, please let us know at PureLoveTalks@gmail.com, and sign up for a subscription at www.purelovetalks.com, and we also have a YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.